What the empty space reveals about the soul. Why does it hurt so much when someone walks away? It's a pain that's hard to describe. Not physical, not even fully emotional, but something deeper, more ancient, a silent ache that whispers in the dark. They're gone. And so is a part of me. We don't just miss a person, we miss the world we built around them. We miss who we were when we were with them. And when they leave, what remains is a haunting question. Who am I now, without them? Carl Jung believed that love, longing, and even heartbreak are not just psychological phenomena. They are sacred, archetypal. They reveal not just our wounds, but our soul's hunger for wholeness. When you miss someone, it's not always about them. Sometimes it's your soul mourning a lost mirror, a reflection of a part of you that felt alive in their presence. This is not just a video about loss. This is a journey, a descent into the invisible layers of the psyche where pain becomes a guide and absence reveals presence, because if you follow the trail of your longing, you may find something even more valuable than the one you lost yourself. So breathe deeply, open the door to your inner world, and come with me. Let's explore what Jung called the alchemy of the heart, where love, loss, shadow, and soul all converge in the crucible of transformation. Chapter 1 begins now, but be warned. Once you descend, you may not come back the same. Chapter 1, the empty space. Why it hurts so much to miss someone. There's a silence that follows someone's absence. It's not just the lack of their voice, their presence, their laughter. It's the stillness of something inside us that used to move when they were near. Missing someone is not a simple emotional reaction. It's a psychic rupture, a tearing open of a space that once felt full and now echoes with memories, longings, and what-ifs. But why does it hurt so deeply? Modern psychology might say it's attachment, neural pathways that became wired together now misfire. The brain grieves, the body reacts, cortisol floods the system. Yes, the science is there. But Carl Jung would ask something else. What soul story lies beneath this pain? Because this isn't just about them. This is about you, your inner world, your hidden needs, your longing for union, and your fear of abandonment. What you feel when someone is gone isn't only about losing them. It's about losing a part of your psychic wholeness. And that is a kind of grief that can't be comforted by logic. From a Jungian perspective, the pain of missing someone isn't merely emotional suffering, it's the eruption of the unconscious, calling your attention to something deeper, something sacred. You see, the people we bond with are never neutral. We don't fall in love with random strangers. We fall for symbols. We are drawn to people who reflect something we've lost, something we desire, something we don't even know we're searching for. When we miss someone, we don't just mourn them, we mourn the meaning they carried. That's why it can feel like your chest is collapsing, because what they represented, security, belonging, passion, validation, mystery, has vanished. And you're left holding the shell of a story that no longer has a character. And still, you remember the small things, their favorite words, the way they looked at you when they thought you weren't watching, the last time you laughed together, the rituals that made the ordinary feel eternal. These fragments become sacred relics in your mind, and every time you revisit them, you reopen the space in your heart where they used to live. But what if that space isn't meant to be closed? What if the ache is not a wound, but a doorway? Jung taught that longing is a signpost, that wherever we feel lack, we are also touching potential. Missing someone, then, is not weakness. It's the soul calling you to retrieve the part of yourself you placed in their hands. Because here's the secret no one tells you. Sometimes we don't miss the person. We miss who we thought we could be with them. We miss the possibility. We miss the fantasy. We miss the version of ourselves that felt closer to wholeness in their presence. And in that realization, a deeper truth begins to emerge. What if the pain you feel is not just about losing someone you loved, but losing contact with a part of yourself you projected onto them? What if the one you're really missing is you? Reflect on this. Who have you missed that still lives inside you in symbolic form? What were they reflecting back to you that you now must find on your own? And now the question becomes, if this pain is a message from the unconscious, what else is hiding beneath the surface? In Chapter 2, we descend even deeper into the invisible, architecture of the mind, where abandonment is not just an event, but a story written in shadow. Chapter 2, The Invisible Wound, how the unconscious processes abandonment. You can't see it on a scan, you won't find it on an X-ray or in a blood test, but somewhere deep within, beneath language, beneath reason, there is a wound, and it opens when someone leaves. We call it abandonment. But Jung might call it a psychic rupture, a moment when the ego is forced to confront its own incompleteness. Because abandonment isn't just about being left behind. It's about the sudden collapse of a symbolic world, the one where you were chosen, seen, valued, where the other made you feel real. When that bond is severed, the conscious mind scrambles for explanations. But the unconscious remembers everything. Every childhood silence, every unmet gaze, every time you were not held when you needed to be. So when someone important disappears from your life, a lover, a friend, a parent, it's not just their absence. That hurts. It's the activation of a much older wound, a pattern, a myth repeating itself in your soul. And this is where Jung's genius speaks to us. He believed that the unconscious is not random. It is patterned, mythic, archetypal. That means our pain follows a deeper script, one written long before we were born. In this script, abandonment is not simply loss, it is initiation, because to be abandoned is also to be forced inward, to face the inner orphan, to meet the part of you that was once exiled in silence, the part that you've spent years trying to soothe through relationships, achievements, distractions, but it never really goes away, does it? In dreams, it might appear as a lost child, a locked door, a dark, empty house. These are not just symbols, they are messages, images of the soul trying to be remembered. This is why grief feels like madness, because it's not just rational sadness, it's archetypal chaos. The ego breaks down, time becomes distorted, reality softens, and in that space, the unconscious begins to speak in its own language. You might start dreaming more vividly, feeling pulled to old songs, childhood places, forgotten memories. These are clues, breadcrumbs from the shadow, guiding you inward, not to punish you, but to reunite you with a deeper truth. Because here's the paradox, the people we lose often take us back to parts of ourselves we abandoned long ago, and so missing someone becomes a ritual of return, not to them, but to your own soul. This doesn't happen quickly. The unconscious doesn't rush. It whispers, it waits, and when you finally pause long enough to feel the full weight of the silence, you may hear something beneath the grief, a voice you haven't heard in years, the inner child, the one who first felt the sting of not being chosen. You see, every act of abandonment's an echo of the original loss, and every longing for reunion is the soul trying to complete the story. So the question is not just, why did they leave? But what part of me is crying out to be found? Reflect on this. What early memory does your current loss awaken? Can you see a pattern between past wounds and present pain? Because if abandonment is an archetype, then every time it appears, it's inviting you into transformation. And in the next chapter, we meet the oldest image of this loss, not from psychology, but from myth, a presence we all know, even if we've never spoken her name. Chapter 3, The Lost Beloved. Archetypes of love and separation in myth and soul. Somewhere in the soul of every human being lives the memory of a love that was lost. It might not be tied to a name or a face, but it's there, woven into our dreams, our art, our most haunting longings. Carl Jung taught that we do not suffer alone, that our personal stories are echoes of collective patterns engraved in the deep structure of the unconscious. These patterns are archetypes, timeless images that shape the way we love, fear, grieve, and heal. And one of the most powerful of all is the archetype of the lost beloved. You can find her in every culture, Eurydice slipping back into the underworld, just as Orpheus turns to look. Inanna descending into the realm of shadow to reclaim her power. Isis gathering the broken pieces of Osiris, trying to make him whole again. Or Psyche wandering the earth in anguish, searching for her fallen lover, Eros. These myths are not just old stories, they are mirrors of our inner experience. Because when we lose someone we love, our psyche doesn't just react, it reenacts. We become Orpheus, looking back one last time, hoping we can reverse the loss. We become Psyche, walking blindly through unknown lands, guided only by the ache in our heart. We become both the seeker and the sought, the one left behind, and the one disappearing into shadow. But why? Because the archetype of the lost beloved is not about one person. It's about a spiritual truth, that love always leads us to the edge of death. Not literal death, but the death of certainty, the death of the self as we knew it. And in that collapse, the soul begins its work. The myth teaches us that love is never just romantic. It is transformational. It pulls up everything: beauty, fear, innocence, shadow, hope. That's why when someone leaves, it feels like the ground beneath you vanishes, because symbolically it does. You are descending like Inanna, like Persephone, like the dreamer who dares to enter the underworld. You thought you were just missing a person, but what you're really doing is walking the mythic path of descent. And here's the paradox: that path was always inside you. You just didn't see it until they left. Because sometimes it takes heartbreak to awaken the sacred. Sometimes it takes the absence of the beloved to call forth the deeper self. This is what Jung meant when he said, the loss of the object is compensated by the gain of the subject. In other words, you lose them and find yourself, but not yet, not completely. First, you must walk further into the myth. Reflect on this. Which myth speaks to your experience of loss? What part of your soul is playing out an ancient story? Because the pain you feel is not meaningless. It is part of the sacred drama of becoming whole. And in the next chapter, we face a more uncomfortable truth, that the beloved we miss might be a projection of something we've lost within ourselves. Chapter 4. The shadow of love, what we project onto the other, and what we lose in ourselves. At first, they seemed perfect, not flawless, but fated, like meeting them unlocked something ancient in you, a recognition that bypassed reason. You didn't just fall in love, you fell into a story. But here's what no one tells you about love. It often begins as a projection. Carl Jung described projection as the act of placing parts of ourselves, parts we don't fully recognize or accept, onto another person. In love, this can be intoxicating, because suddenly someone else carries your unlived beauty, your forgotten innocence, your sense of divine connection. They become a mirror, but one that only reflects what you're ready to see. This is why losing someone can feel like losing your soul. Because in a way, you put your soul in them. You gave them your light. You gave them your longing. You gave them your image of the sacred, your hope of salvation, your dream of being whole. And then they left, and it wasn't just their body that walked away. It was everything you invested in them. But what if They were never carrying your soul. What if they were only carrying your shadow? The shadow, in Jungian terms, is not just our darkness. It's everything we've repressed, everything too tender, too wild, too powerful, too divine to be held by our unconscious self. So we put it somewhere else, onto the beloved, onto the other. We say, "You complete me." But what we often mean is, "You carry what I can't hold." And this is why heartbreak is so devastating, because the person takes not just your love, but your projection with them. And you're left not just alone, but emptied, dismantled, confronted by a terrible silence. Who am I without them? And what did they awaken in me that was always mine? You see, the love was real, but the image was a construction of the psyche. That doesn't make it false. It makes it sacred, because through projection, your unconscious revealed what it most needed to reclaim those lost parts, those radiant aspects of your being that you gave away. So, when you miss someone, ask yourself, what part of me was I loving in them? Was it my tenderness, my mystery, my courage, my sense of being chosen? Can I take it back now? Can I carry it myself? Because love, when it matures, is not about finding someone who completes you. It's about discovering the wholeness already within and sharing it freely without needing the other to carry your soul. Reflect on this. What qualities did you fall in love with? Are those qualities also hidden within you? Because when you stop projecting, you don't lose love, you deepen it. You no longer search outside for what lives inside. But this isn't the end of the grief, because even when the projection fades, the longing remains. And in that longing, a new journey begins, not toward the other, but toward the self. In Chapter 5, we follow that longing into the sacred process of individuation, where grief becomes not a curse, but a guide. Chapter 5. The return to soul. Grief as the beginning of individuation. There comes a moment in grief when the world doesn't make sense anymore. You wake up in a body that doesn't feel like home. You look in the mirror and don't recognize your eyes. The colors are dimmer, the sounds more distant. Everything feels hollow. And yet, beneath the sorrow, beneath the weight of everything lost, there is a flicker, a faint light, far below the surface. You can barely name it, but it's there. Carl Jung called this moment the threshold of individuation, because when someone leaves and takes with them your identity, your security, your illusions, what remains is not just emptiness. What remains is soul. You see, soul is not polite, it's not clean. It doesn't arrive in moments of triumph. Soul descends, soul cracks, soul aches, and grief is the soul's way of calling you back, not to the past, not to the person, but to your own depths. In Jungian psychology, individuation is the process of becoming whole, of integrating your shadow, your desires, your fears, your potential. It is not the path of comfort, it is the path of truth, and grief is the first fire. When you lose someone you love, you're not just grieving them, you're grieving the version of yourself that existed in their presence. You're grieving your reflection in their eyes. You're grieving a future that will never come, but in that sacred unraveling, something begins to stir, the deeper self, the self that cannot be abandoned because it was never outside you, the self that existed before they arrived, and the self that will remain after everything else falls away. This is not philosophy. This is initiation. Because every descent into grief is also a descent into the soul. Just like Inanna, the Sumerian goddess who stripped away her jewels and robes as she entered the underworld, you too are being stripped. Not as punishment, but as preparation. You are being asked to leave behind your personas, your attachments, your projections. So you can remember who you are beneath them. And what do you find in that silence? Not answers, but presence. The kind of presence that doesn't need to fix or escape. The kind of presence that sits with sorrow and listens to the messages buried in its folds. Because grief speaks. It speaks through tears, through stillness, through dreams and sleepless nights, and if you're willing to listen, it will guide you, step by trembling step, towards something real. Not the return of the lost beloved, but the return of you, the one who forgot their own worth, the one who mistook love for dependency, the one who believed that wholeness lived in someone else's hands. That version of you is dying, and something wiser is being born. Reflect on this. What parts of yourself have emerged since the loss? What is grief revealing that joy never could? Because this isn't the end of the story, it's the midpoint, the place where the old identity crumbles and the new self begins to take shape. But that self cannot grow if you numb the pain. It grows through the pain. And in the next chapter, we'll discover how healing doesn't mean forgetting, but learning to carry the loss as part of who you are, without letting it define who you become. Chapter 6. Healing is not forgetting. The alchemy of integration. What does healing really mean? We often think healing is a destination, a place where the pain is gone, where we feel normal again, where the person we lost fades gently into the background. But the soul doesn't work like that. In Jungian psychology, true healing is not about forgetting. It's not about moving on or letting go in the way we're taught. It's about transformation, and transformation means nothing is ever the same again. Because when someone leaves, they leave traces, not just in memories, but in who you become after them. You don't forget. You integrate. You take the love, the pain, the lessons, and you let them shape your inner architecture. And this process is alchemical. In medieval alchemy, the transformation of base metals into gold was never just about material wealth. It was a metaphor for turning suffering into wisdom, loss into presence, wounds into gateways. That is what grief demands of you. Not to erase the beloved, but to carry them differently. At first, the pain is raw, sharp, unbearable, but slowly it softens. It begins to weave itself into your nervous system, into your imagination, into your creativity and silence. They become part of your inner world. Their voice might still echo, but now it speaks from within, not haunting you, but guiding you. You may find yourself doing things they used to love, reading their favorite books, visiting the places you dreamed of going together, speaking to them in the quiet. This is not madness. This is soul, because the people we love never truly leave. They become symbols, they become archetypes within us. And when you allow the beloved to live inside you, not as fantasy, not as regret, but as part of your wholeness, you have entered the realm of integration. But this work is sacred, and it cannot be rushed. You must grieve at your own pace. You must tend to the memory like tending to a flame, not letting it burn you, but not letting it go out either, because sometimes healing doesn't look like closure. It looks like carrying the story differently, not as a wound, but as a myth, a sacred chapter in your unfolding. Jung once said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely," and grief often brings us face to face with that terror, because in integrating the loss, you are also integrating your capacity to love, to suffer, to endure, to grow. You are not healing to forget them. You are healing so you can become more whole with them inside you. Reflect on this. What if healing isn't erasing the love, but giving it a new form? How are you different because of the person you lost? Because healing is not a return, it's a rebirth. And in the next chapter, we'll explore the final movement of this inner journey. How loss can transform romantic love into a deeper, more grounded love of self and soul. Chapter 7. From romantic love to real love. What loss teaches us about ourselves. At first, the love felt magical. It lifted you out of yourself, made the world brighter, more vivid. You felt chosen, seen, alive. That's the gift of romantic love. It invites us into a realm beyond logic. It awakens something eternal. But Jung warned us, what begins in projection must end in integration. And so the beloved, as divine, as they seemed, must one day fall from the pedestal, sometimes through conflict, sometimes through abandonment, sometimes simply through the slow erosion of time. And when they do, we're left not just with pain, but with the echo of a larger truth. The love we felt wasn't only about them, it was about us, about the parts of ourselves we were finally allowed to feel, the beauty we projected outward, the innocence we saw, reflected, the soulfulness we thought they carried, and in their absence, we begin to reclaim those pieces. This is the alchemy of heartbreak, the process of turning romantic love into real love. Not a fantasy, not a longing for completion, but a grounded, embodied love that includes you. A love that says, I do not need someone else to awaken me. I am already whole, and I will choose to love from that wholeness. This is the love that grief teaches, the love that doesn't cling or beg or break itself to be enough, the love that holds both joy and sorrow in the same breath. It is not a lesser love, it is a truer one. Because once you have sat with your own pain, once you've made a home inside the silence, you no longer seek someone to complete you. You seek someone to walk beside you. And if they go, you will grieve, you will ache, but you will not collapse because you are no longer standing on the foundation of illusion. You are rooted in soul. You've learned that the beloved was never meant to save you. They were meant to reveal you, to pull the curtain back on the sacred longing within you so you could follow it. All the way home, reflect on this. What has your loss taught you about the way you love? What within you has awakened that was asleep before? Because if you can love someone enough to break over them, you can love yourself enough to rise from it. And so the story ends, not with a reunion, but with a rebirth. Not with forgetting, but with remembering that love, even in loss, always leads us back to the soul. Conclusion. The soul after loss, a new way to love. Some journeys don't take you across distances, they take you inward, into the caverns of grief, into the shadows of longing, into the fire that strips away illusion and leaves only truth. You began this story missing someone, maybe you still do. But what if that ache is not a weakness, but a whisper from the soul? What if missing them was never just about them? What if it was a call to remember you, because in your sorrow you faced yourself? You found the wounds you had buried, the needs you had masked, the beauty you had forgotten was yours. You met the inner child, the abandoned self, the voice that had long gone unheard, and in doing so, you stepped into the great mystery that Jung called individuation, not becoming someone new, but becoming who you always were, beneath the projections, the attachments, the masks. And now you carry that love differently, not as fantasy, not as need, but as fuel for the soul. You understand now, healing is not forgetting, wholeness is not perfection, and love is not about being saved, it is about being seen. By another, yes, but first, by yourself. Before you go, ask yourself, what part of me did I give away in love that I now want to reclaim? What myth does my heart keep replaying, and am I ready to write a new ending? Can I carry my grief not as a burden, but as a sacred thread woven into my story? If you're in the middle of loss, here are 3 invitations for the soul. Create a sacred space of remembrance. Light a candle. Write them a letter. Let the memory become a ritual, not to bring them back, but to bring you closer to yourself. Dream with intention. Before sleep, ask your unconscious to reveal what still needs to be healed. Record your dreams. Symbols will come, they always do. Speak your truth. Aloud, tell your story. To a friend, to a journal, to the wind. Give shape to your silence. The soul listens when we speak with honesty. In the end, love never truly disappears. It changes form. It matures, it deepens, and one day, when you least expect it, you will feel it rise again, not as the longing for another, but as the presence of someone who never left, yourself.